Welcome to the channel, Met Cancer, Metabolic, Not Genetic. I'm your host, Vince Gledhill. Now, I'm not a doctor, and none of this is medical advice. I'm just some random bloke on the internet. This may be the ramblings of a madman. In today's episode, a reaction video to a new video that was released on YouTube by Lauren Knight Hughes. And there is a link to the full video in the description. It is Professor Thomas Seyfried and Dr Fred Bunz, an oncologist from Johns Hopkins. Now, let's listen to the professor as he discusses primary versus secondary risk factors and the nuclear transfer experiments.
To recognize what is primary cause of dysregulated cell growth versus secondary cause of dysregulated cell growth. If we have 50% of the women that have BRCA mutation have breast cancer, there's 50% of the women that have BRCA mutation that don't have breast cancer, and every woman that has the breast tumor has damage to mitochondria. That means the mitochondrial damage is the origin of the dysregulated growth, because we can have the mutation without the dysregulated growth, but we can never have the dysregulated growth without the damage to the mitochondria, insufficient oxidative phosphorylation. So mutations are neither necessary nor sufficient.
Just look at Dr. Bunz's face there. He's absolutely like, what? Is he getting it? Do you think he's getting it? Well, we'll see.
To lead to dysregulated cell growth. But mitochondrial inefficiency is
No, he's not getting it. You can see there from his body language, he's already made his mind up. He's taking no notice of what the professor's saying whatsoever.
Is necessary and sufficient with a compensatory fermentation. So I think we always have to put into
mutation,
perspective.
though, is a known risk factor, right?
Well, you have risk factors for sure, but is it a primary risk factor or a secondary risk factor?
I mean, it has to be a primary risk factor because you can identify who's at risk by genetic sequencing.
Yes, but they don't all get cancer.
Right, but you can know who's at risk, right? You know, again, as we've discussed.
No, I'm not saying you can't.
Does every person who has mitochondrial disruption get cancer? Does that?
No, that's you have to have the compensatory fermentation. You have to, if you have damage to the mitochondria, you'll kill the cell quick. But the question is getting back to primary and secondary, because I think this is so important when we're looking at origins. Is the mutation a primary cause or a secondary cause? I look at it, if it's a primary cause, every time you have that mutation, you get the tumor, regardless of whether it's a breast tumor, colon tumor, whatever it is. It's 100% penetrant. There's no ambiguity. But if a person carries the mutation and never develops the tumor in their lifetime, then that was not a primary risk factor. It was a secondary risk factor.
Well, but then how do you explain the increased risk, on a population basis of people that carry a BRCA1 mutation?
Yeah, but there's a lot of women that
why are they getting more? Yeah, but why is there more cancer in that population?
Because that mutation damages oxidative phosphorylation.
Right.
If it is,
He doesn't get it, does he? He doesn't get it at all.
That's a cause and effect, right?
Yeah. But you cannot find a tumor without damage, insufficient oxidative phosphorylation. But you can find women with BRCA1 mutation that don't have cancer, or ever get cancer in their lifetime. So yes, it's a very significant risk factor, but it's a secondary risk factor. The key is the primary. What is the primary elicitor of dysregulated cell growth? And it is insufficient respiration with compensatory fermentation, which has been found in every known cancer that anyone has looked at. No one has ever seen tumors with normal oxidative phosphorylation. In vivo. In vitro, you see this because oxygen consumption is not an accurate marker for respiration in vitro, but in vivo it is. So I think you have to look at, I think it's important for people to look up the differences between primary and secondary risk factors. Smoking is a secondary risk factor. Obesity is a secondary risk factor. Insufficient inflammation, viral infections, papillomavirus, hepatitis. These are all secondary risk factors. They cause cancer only if they damage oxidative phosphorylation.
So
then you get dysregulated.
Yeah, so let me just say this concept of a primary and a secondary risk factor is really not a widely accepted sort of concept. So when we, in sort of maybe I would argue the mainstream, we talk about risk factors. There's sort of risk factors, but there are also underlying causes. And so those are two different things. So if you create a mouse that's going to get cancer later in his life, the underlying cause is that genetic alteration. And if you expose that mice to chemicals or do any number of other things, yeah, that mice or radiation, that mouse will likely get cancer at a younger age. So you can look at, again, in human populations, again, we know that these germline genetic mutations are profoundly increase our genetic risk, but other things can increase that risk also. So all of us have multiple sources of cancer risk. So when we talk about, all risk factors are, they have different magnitudes, but we don't really think of primary and secondary.
He really doesn't get it, does he? He really, really doesn't get it. It's damage to the mitochondria that is the cause of the cancer. Let's carry on.
The primary underlying cause are the cancer mutations that fundamentally change how cancer cells operate and how they function, including their metabolic defects. Again, this is a point we disagree on, but
I look at the nuclear cytoplasmic transfer experiments. If the neoplastic growth in a tumor is driven by genetic mutations in the nucleus, according to the somatic mutation theory, dysregulated cell growth is caused by 1, 2, dozen mutations, doesn't make any difference, drivers and whatever. And you take that nucleus and put it in a new cytoplasm, and you no longer get dysregulated cell growth. That says that those mutations are, whatever they were, no matter how many there were not the drivers of the dysregulated growth. If I take the normal nucleus and put it in a tumor cytoplasm, I get dysregulated growth. So clearly it's the cytoplasm and the mitochondria. And these experiments have been done over and over again in all kinds of different systems testing. They were not testing the somatic mutation theory.
Just take a look at Dr. Bunz's face there. Either he doesn't get it, he doesn't understand what the professor's saying, or he's already made his mind up.
But the results from those experiments clearly tell us that the mutations in the nucleus of these tumor cells are not the drivers of dysregulated cell growth. I mean, it's hard to reject those findings. You can say, well, they're primary causes. Okay, if that's the primary cause, how come when I put that nucleus in a new cytoplasm, I don't get dysregulated growth? And if I take a normal nucleus, healthy, and put it in a cancer cytoplasm, I get dysregulated cell growth. How do you explain that? That's not explainable on the somatic mutation theory, no matter how you cut and look at it. You got to think. And what troubles me is that a lot of folks ignore those nuclear mitochondrial cytoplasmic transfer experiments that clearly show that this. And the only person that really understood that was the late Ruth Sager at Harvard. She said these nuclear transfer experiments support Otto Warburg's theory of cancer because you're not getting the dysregulated growth. When you put a tumor nucleus into when you put a tumor nucleus into a normal cytoplasm. So why you don't get dysregulated growth when it has all the driver genes and the broken chromosomes and the somatic mutations? Why that doesn't cause the dysregulated cell growth? That's the big question. And the bigger question is, how come nobody discusses these kinds of experiments? This is my conundrum.
And at this point, when I was first watching this video, I was waiting for Dr. Bunz to come back with an answer, but he doesn't.
People were saying, well, I didn't know about those experiments. Well, I think everybody needs to know those experiments and look at them and say, how do you explain this phenomenon of cancer dysregulated growth based on these nuclear cytoplasm transfer experiments? They're not consistent with this somatic mutation theory. So I want to just say that, and I think people need to look at all the evidence. I don't look at it any different from the geocentric heliocentric theory of the solar system. For 1,800 years, we were using epicycles and deference to try to explain how planets and celestial bodies revolved around an immovable Earth. Okay, it took 1,800 years before Copernicus said, maybe we got it all wrong. Maybe the sun is the center and the planets are all revolving around the sun.
We got it all wrong.
And then Kepler came in with the helical orbits, and Galileo with the telescope, and all of a sudden everybody says, the Earth revolves around the sun. I look at the somatic mutation theory and the mitochondrial metabolic theory as at exactly the same position that we have today. Once we realize that cancer is a mitochondrial metabolic disorder, the solution to the problem will be quite apparent. And when you take people that have cancer and remove the fuel.
Is Fred taking it on board there? What do you think? Let me know in the comments below.
That drive the dysregulated cell growth, then you'll start to get management of the disorder, and people will start living longer at a healthier overall and quality of life that is progression-free, and overall survival will increase dramatically. And we're beginning to see this now in all these stage 4 cancer people who are shifting to metabolic therapy. So the bottom line is, I think as long as we consider that cancer is a genetic disease, we're not going to drop those death rates in any significant way for the foreseeable future. Once you realize that it's a mitochondrial metabolic disease, I think we can drop the death rate by 50% in 5 to 10 years, depending on how you go after it. You're going to see that needle drop significantly. But if we're chasing genes and we're doing these genomic mega maps and all this kind of stuff, and all these people are dying from cancer, something has to change here. And I think you got to look at the nuclear transfer mitochondria. You have to look at all the data. Driver genes that don't cause neoplastic growth, nuclear transfer experiments. And then you have to say to yourself, maybe we got it all wrong. Maybe we're not right. And that's what the field found when you put the sun in the center of the solar system. Everything made sense. You didn't need epicycles any longer.
Okay.
So now let's listen to Dr. Bunz' answer.
So
that's my view. And I think I'm right. And I think we're going to drop this death rate very, very big once people come to realize that they can't live without a fermentation metabolism. And that's not difficult to target. Targeting fermentation is a hell of a lot easier than targeting a bunch of genes which may or may not lead to overall outcome.
So, did you hear the answer? No, neither did I. That's because there wasn't one. He never had an answer for Professor Seyfried and the nuclear transfer experiments. Now, did he take it on board? Is he going to take it back to Johns Hopkins and look into it? Let's see. I'm not holding my breath. Are you? Really? Nah. Well, that'll do it for today. If you like the video, please give it a thumbs up and remember to subscribe. Oh, subscribe. Thank you.